But
We are.
great. So we're live streaming this meeting, which means that the way the equipment's set up in here, everybody has to sit at their allocated places. So I know there's a few gaps around the room, but we have to, like I say, sit in our seats behind our name tag. So hello, Tim, right down at the far end there. We can't. Yes. I felt I should have brought my binoculars to read the name, some of the name tags down there. So like I say, we do have to sit in our seats for the live stream. So as this is the first meeting of the municipal year, I'm just going to welcome the new people to the meeting. Then I'm going to suggest we just go around the room so everybody can introduce themselves. So welcome Shirley Congdon from University of Bradford, who is our new Deputy Chair. Milton Brown from Kirklees Live TV. Michelle Chappell from Dixon SCS Group, Tim Craven from TransUnion UK, and Phil Loutman from Care to Care, and also from the elected members, Graham Turner from Kirklees, Jess Lennox from Leeds, Darren Byford, who I don't think's here yet, from Wakefield, and Andrew Waller from York, and Sharon Riding, who is a DWP advisory rep on the committee. So welcome to all the new members. I'm going to ask that we all, I'm just reading out the new members, Sylvia, we recognise you from last year. I'm just going to ask that everybody just goes round to introduce themselves so people, everybody knows who everybody is and those sat in the public seats that can't see the name tags know who we are. So I'm going to ask to start with Brian, please, then we'll go that way around the table.
Brian Archer, Director of Economic Services at the Combined Authority.
Phil Wycherley, Head of Business Innovation, Skills and Culture Policy at the Combined Authority.
Shirley Condon, Vice Chancellor, University of Bradford, and I'm just finishing my last two-year term as Chair of Yorkshire Universities, and I'm a member of the LEP Board.
Hi, Councillor Jess Lennox. It's my first year on the committee. I'm a Leeds City Councillor and I support the Employment and Skills and Culture portfolio in Leeds.
I'm Councillor Sylvia Dacre. I'm a Cabinet Member for Resources, which includes skills for Calderdale Council.
Councillor Graham Turner from Kirklees, Cabinet Member for Regen and Post-16 Skills and Education.
Councillor Andrew Waller from City of York Council, Executive Member for Children, Young People and Education, which covers the skills portfolio. Thank you.
Tim Thornton, I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the University of Huddersfield. I'm one of the HE advisory representatives, along with my colleague Peter O'Brien, who unfortunately has given his apologies due to COVID.
Morning everyone, Milton Brown, Kirklees Local TV CEO and Private Sector Representative. Thank you.
Good morning all, Tim Craven. I work for TransUnion, technical business in town. I'm also Chair of Governors at the University Technical College in Leeds.
It's Phil Lockman from Care to Care. I'm the COO. It's health and social care, working mainly in care in the community.
Richard Mason. So I started out at Burberry when I started on this group, but I'm now Head of Environmental Social Governance at Holland and Barrett. So not Leeds based, but I am work from home, which is the new normal for Holland and Barrett.
Michelle Chappell-Dixon. I'm a Financial Director from SCS Building Solutions and I'm a Private Sector Representative.
Jeanette Woodcock from Governance Services, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
I'm Michelle Burton, I'm Head of Employment and Skills at the Combined Authority.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just sneaked in, sorry about that. Notice that my one's down there. So it's Mark Cowgill, I'm the co-founder and director of EXA Networks, and we also run the EXA Foundation.
Thank you, Mark. Dr. Thank you, Sharon. Welcome, everybody. I will turn to the apologies for absence, please, Jeanette. Oh, I've already got them. So it's Liz Needleman, Claire Paxman, Nav Cohen from the West Yorkshire Skills Partnership, Alex Miles, Peter O'Brien and Colin Booth. have sent their apologies. I'm going to move on to the declaration of disclosable interest, and I have a little bit of small print to read out, but it is important for this committee that the committee will be asked to make recommendations related to the adult education budget for decision by the CA and by the Managing Director of the Combined Authority under his delegations. Therefore, in the interest of transparency, all members of the committee with an interest, including local authorities and colleges, should declare it at this point. You will still be able to participate in the discussion. This is people on the committee last year will remember, obviously, we, as part of the devolution deal, we have devolved adult education budget, but with the point we got to last year is, as most of us sat around the table, including myself as leader of Leeds Council, are in receipt of adult education budget, rather than having decision-making powers here, which would mean we'd have a mass exodus of people whenever adult education budget came up. We agreed decisions around the adult education budget would formally be made by the managing director of the combined authority, and we would act in an advisory capacity, but we're still advised to declare if we're in receipt of adult education budget here. That's the way we got to, so we could continue to have a really useful discussion here about it without having any conflicts of interest, as obviously want to keep the highest standards of probity and integrity at the combined authority. So that's a lot to say for a very simple thing. So if anybody wants to add anything to that, or we'll move on to the next item, which is item 3 on exempt information, possible exclusion of the press and public. Appendix 1 to item 10 has data which the DfE does not permit us to publish publicly, so it's in the private pack. If, when we get to item 10, anybody wishes to discuss the item in that appendix, you're more than free to raise it and do it. However, we do at that point need to ask the press and public to leave, and I'll just remind people at that point when we get to item 10. I will move on to item 4, which is the notes of the informal consultative meeting held back in January, and just check that everybody is happy with those minutes, or if there's anything anybody wants to raise on those. Take it there isn't, so we'll confirm those and just move on to the chair's update. And a couple of things I just wanted to update on, which relate to government announcements. First of all, the Multiply Adult Numeracy programme, which is devolved to the Combined Authority in this area, and we are working with officers and local authorities on an investment plan to address local priorities. It came to the Combined Authority meeting on the 23rd of June, and we're happy with the direction of that. I know it's been circulated to members of this committee, and we'll keep everybody updated. I wanted to bring that at the beginning of the meeting, and also the UK Shared Prosperity Fund plan, which is being developed. The government have set this up with 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is community and place. Pillar 2 is supporting local businesses, and Pillar 3 is people and skills. Clearly, we're most interested in the people and skills aspect here, and that's being developed for when funding starts in financial year 24-25. There's a group being set up, a partnership group being set up for Shared Prosperity Fund, and Colin Booth, Bill Adams, Alex Miles and Sharon Riding are on this and on this committee as well. So if there's any questions on those 2 bits of information, I take it or not, we'll move on to governance arrangements. I'm looking at Michelle for this one, please.
So, so this paper summarises the governance arrangements for this committee, which were agreed by the Combined Authority at its last meeting. We're just asking you to note the terms of reference and the new membership, including everyone that's introduced at the beginning of this meeting. In addition, committee members will be aware that a number of representatives on the committee are nominated. So a number of those that are not here actually are nominated for membership of the committee by the West Yorkshire Skills Partnership, which is a partnership in West Yorkshire of colleges, independent training providers, voluntary and community sector and universities. And Tim, of course, is here as Deputy Chair of the West Yorkshire Skills Partnership. In the context of mayoral devolution, we've been asked by some providers about how they would, training providers, about how they would get onto this committee. And therefore the proposal is that we ask Nav, who unfortunately is poorly today, as Chair of the committee, to bring forward to the next meeting how the West Yorkshire Skills Partnership will ensure that providers they put forward for membership here, who obviously have got such an important role in influencing the system, will be representative and diverse, because we've been asked quite a lot of questions about how providers are appointed to the committee.
Thank you, Michelle. Just turning to the, if anybody's got any questions on that, and like I say, we look forward to hearing back from Nav when hopefully he's feeling better. So there are some recommendations on this paper, which is to note the arrangements agreed by the combined authority. So before I turn to that, if there's any questions from the committee, hopefully fairly straightforward. Thank you. We'll move on. Take it we agree the recommendations, and we'll move on to item 7, which is the digital skills plan. And I'd like to invite Marianne Hewitt to come and present this, please, and then we'll move on to discussion and questions. Hi there.
Can you hear me now? Great. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I'm Marianne Hewitt. I've been pulling together the views of lots of different stakeholders to write up this digital skills plan. So I'd like to run through the draft of this with you today and take your feedback before it goes to design. It'll also be seen by the Business, Economy and Innovation Committee next week. Have the next slide, please. So firstly, why do we need a digital skills plan for West Yorkshire? Our vision is to create an inclusive society and a thriving economy through the growth of digital skills for all. So the plan tackles several key areas that would benefit from increased digital skills. So that includes high-level skills for the tech sector, digital skills for all businesses, a talent pipeline of future workforce, digital upskilling for the existing workforce, digital education and pathways, digital inclusion and data. Now I'd like to highlight the data section here because as you'll see in the plan, a lot of our data on digital skills covers all of Yorkshire and Humber. That's based on DCMS geographies. So a crucial next step is to identify a baseline of West Yorkshire data for digital skills so that we can really monitor the action, the impact of the action plan. Next slide, please. Just a note that the UK Digital Strategy was published last month. I won't go into too much detail on their actions, but would like to point out that the West Yorkshire Digital Skills Plan includes all of this and more, and it's specific to our region. Next slide, please. West Yorkshire is one of the 8 regions in the UK that was selected by DCMS to run a local digital skills partnership called an LDSP. The LDSP convenes public, private and community voices in the digital skills arena to identify the challenges and potential solutions, which is what we've done here. The LDSP identified 4 work streams, as you can see there: social digital inclusion, workforce for the future, SME and third sector digital growth, and simplifying the digital offer. The plan's vision and these 4 work streams were very enthusiastically endorsed last year by this committee, and this plan builds on those. Next slide, please. So who's consulted on the action plan? There's been a wide range of stakeholders involved in this, and their feedback and their insights have been embedded into the content. That's a range of employers, our 5 local authority partners, representatives from the third sector, learning providers, etc. Bill Jones and Mandy Ridyard have been heavily involved in this, and there's quite a few names around the table I can see that have provided feedback as well. Next slide, please. So this is the plan on a page. Design will hopefully work to make this more legible. If you can't see it, it's page 40 in your pack. So this is a simplified logic model or theory of change. Each work stream is present at the top there, with the core challenge in black at the first line. Then the priority actions, which were identified by the LDSP, that's the teal line. The intended outcome of these actions below, and then finally the overall impact. And that is that in line with the Levelling Up agenda, all West Yorkshire residents will benefit from the financial and social benefits of using digital technologies to enhance their quality of life within their communities. Residents will improve their employment prospects and strengthen the recruitment pool for West Yorkshire businesses. Next slide, please. Now, the core content of the plan, and that starts on page 41 in your pack, just after the plan on the page, provides the following. Each workstream has an evidence base demonstrating the challenge that we face. It has case studies and quotations of projects that are already working well in the region. It has the impact that we want to make, and each workstream then has an action plan to achieve this impact, and each action can be cross-referenced back to the evidence base. Next slide, please. Now, these are a couple of examples of case studies from the plan. So the green one is from the Social Digital Inclusion Workstream and tells the story of person A who used digital access to significantly improve her life. And the blue case study is about a West Yorkshire resident who used the digital boot camps to boost his digital skills, upskill, and it led him to be employed by a digital health company in the region. Next slide, please. So this plan is to be signed off by the Combined Authority Board after it's received your feedback and endorsement. We would like your feedback on it before it goes to design. Any final comments that you have on it will be embedded into it. So there are some questions that we'd like the committee to discuss today. Which of the actions within the digital skills plan would you prioritise? What, if anything, would you add to the action plans? And then after that, your views on next steps would be very appreciated. And if we can move forward to the last slide, please. So the next steps, once the digital skills plan is finalised, we're going to work closely with our local authority partners to prioritise and design programmes based on the actions in this plan. So digital is a key investment priority identified in our investment strategy. Secondly, we're exploring how we can continue the legacy of the LDSP by broadening the scope as we refresh the wider digital framework. The digital framework ensures digital technologies for all businesses, a strong digital sector to enable the rest, tech for good, world-class digital infrastructure, and of course, digital skills for all is involved in that. And then finally, we must make sure that the actions in this plan have a true and measurable impact. As I mentioned at the start, we do need to create that baseline of data for West Yorkshire so that we can monitor our success and ensure that we're really moving the dial on digital skills. So could I just move back to the last slide? Thank you for your time, and yeah, like I said, I'd appreciate your comments.
Thank you, and really useful presentation. So our homework is, in terms of the three things we have to comment on, is on the screen. So I'm going to ask the committee if anybody wishes to pick up points in the presentation, please. Yes, please, Sylvia.
All I want to say is that Calderdale, I suppose the most important thing for them is when you've got that list of 4 ambitions, social digital inclusion is the one that for us is absolutely key before all the others can be attained. So we very much want to prioritise that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I would second what's just been said. I don't think there's any argument about the very welcome priority that's given to entry-level digital skills in the document. What I would, as I guess you would expect, what I would do is perhaps prompt a little around the development of the higher level element in the in the document. The evident demand that there is around high-level skills in this area, and indeed the evident supply of high-quality graduates that we have in West Yorkshire, is actually a strength that we need to build on. I think even if we go beyond the very significant numbers of students who are graduating this summer in specifically IT and computing courses, and look into areas like physical sciences and even some of the creative arts, for example, around music technology, the higher education providers in this part of the world deliver very significant strength in higher level digital skills. What I would accept, though, and I think this is where the work needs to be done, is that the relationship between those providers and the potential employers, and indeed between the graduates and their potential employers, needs to be enhanced. And if there's anything we can do under this element of the plan, I think it's the second strand, to work on those relationships, for example, allowing the students to pursue placement opportunities in West Yorkshire, or to engage in other ways creatively with employers. I think we should place some priority on that, please.
Thank you, Tim. Mark would like to come in, please.
Thank you. Can I just ask for clarification within the plan as to how we are engaging with primary and secondary school, where their focus is predominantly around DFE and Ofsted's academia, and they're often very resistant to engage with anyone that doesn't fit that specific criteria.
Transmitted.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to take that away as a point and write that down, actually. There is something in the Workforce for the Future section with more detail on that, but I'd like to look into it a bit more before I give an answer today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. One of the comment I've picked up as well is, it's a long time since I've been at school, but the curriculum, even where computing subjects and science subjects are on the curriculum, actually the link between what young people are studying up to 16 and 18 isn't the jump between what they would study at school within the frameworks you've talked around, and what would help them in the world of work. There's still quite a big gap there at the moment. I think it's both, like you say, the structures of school and their relationship with the DFE and the curriculums, but also within that, even if that's sort of a bit of a big issue to break down very quickly, but within that, what is part of the curriculum as well. Thank you. Phil, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, I was just going to respond to a couple of those points. So, Tim, thank you for making those points about high-level jobs. I really kind of share a lot of that sentiment. And I think, that what the digital skills plan is trying to do is a whole range of things, from kind of that inclusion agenda, which is clearly important, but also digital skills are important for every job. But particularly, we need to make sure we've got a really good skills base in our region to attract and grow really high value jobs and businesses and attract them to our region. So that's also important. And that link to hearing the business community's voice on this is partly why we're taking this to the Business and Economy Committee next week for their views. And I think we're also trying to think as an organisation and as a region more holistically about digital in its totality, not just digital skills. So as this progresses, we'll be thinking about that. So and really helpful to have your offer and want to use what you've got in the higher education, Shirley, and other higher education institutions in the region. And just that link to schools, I think, obviously, as a combined authority, we don't have that link as strongly with schools and the running of schools and education departments, but we are working very closely with local authorities in the development of this plan. And I think Marianne's already said she'll take that point away, but I think that's something we need to do in partnership, because it is important our kids are within the national curriculum and what flexibility we have around that. Leaving school ready to work, ready to participate in society in a digital way.
A few more hands coming up, so I'm going to work around the table. Richard, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that really quickly 2 points, really. So I know certainly from my time at Burberry, there was always this conflict of the people that they required within the digital jobs. The skills gap that they had was actually not so much the digital skills, but actually the personal skills. So most of the entry-level jobs that would then lead to those more skilled jobs required people to have personal skills that they felt they couldn't get, and a real lack of diversity of people applying for those roles in the first place. So I think it's good that that is included in it. And I think the education piece comes to that. So I think there's something to put back on business as well, and some of the work that the lab's been doing around, you know, future skills and things, reinforcing what are digital jobs and what the skills that are required alongside the digital training. And then finally, just I mentioned it on the last call that we had, but the kind of just transition piece. So not forgetting the groups looking at climate change, because reskilling people that are in roles that aren't going to be around in 10 years is going to be a key part of the digital piece as well. So just not forgetting that as well, that people that don't necessarily have skills and don't work in digital jobs now, as a reflection in that.
Thank you, Richard. Milton, did you have your hand up down there, please?
Yeah, I'm very interested in how the rollout's going to be, and when I read the digital plan, I thought there was an absence of real quality of how this is going to roll out and how we're going to sustain the equality and inclusion. So, for instance, when we go to these higher businesses for these higher level jobs and stuff like that, what is the kind of format you're going to have to ensure that when the diversity of people come to those places, they will be able to stay there and sustain their employment. And I think that the 2010 Equality Act is a very strong narrative to place on businesses that when you get these diverse people in, we should roll that, at least assess how we can sustain those diverse groups in these new organizations. And I didn't see the 2010 Equality Act mentioned once in this document, and I felt it needs to be so that everybody feels, A, we're transparent as a group here, and B, people know that they have to implement it in order to sustain and maintain those diverse groups that may come for these jobs.
Marianne, would you like to come in, please?
Thank you, yeah. In terms of the rollout, the digital skills plan is really the direction of travel that we're going in, and in a couple of weeks' time we've got a workshop to look at the investment pipeline and exactly which programmes and interventions we're going to put forward from this, and it's at that stage that we'll look at building in the targets and the equality and diversity into that. Anything?
To add a couple of points on the very am I working? I've just had a couple of points on the diversity stuff. Mary's absolutely right. We're going to be developing kind of how we deliver this now after we've set these objectives. You raise a really, really important point about accessibility and diversity, and I think, you know, with everything we do, we need to bake in kind of really both targets, but also more importantly, how we kind of approach and get to as wide an audience as possible and a wider learner base as possible. And just to say, kind of in that realm, in terms of kind of high tech jobs, we know that a lot of businesses in the high tech sector actually kind of reach out to people, for example, with neurodiversity, to get them encouraged into work in those areas. So there's kind of the whole range of things we need to look at on that. But we hear your point, and we will make sure that's reflected as this develops.
Thank you, Richard, please.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up. It's a really interesting point, because I think from a business perspective, particularly from attracting new businesses to the area, all businesses have got a real challenge with this, particularly in digital skills. So actually the follow-up of how we measure how well as a region we actually keep people in these jobs and support employees to understand how, I think is a really interesting lever to have. So yeah, it'd be really good to bake in that measurement afterwards of how well, so not just getting the people into these roles, but actually how are we assessing it.
I keep pressing my list button there, it sounds like. Thank you, Richard. Shirley, would you like to come in, please?
Yes, thank you, James. Just going back to the questions you've posed there, I think a lot of people made some really important points. And when you're asking the question, what would we prioritise? I guess some of the comments that have been made might help us to reflect on how we would approach prioritisation. And some things might need to be done concurrently. So when you're thinking about the inclusion and the diversity, you've got to think about the accessibility whilst you're thinking about also access to training. And when we're thinking about the current issues that Richard's just mentioned, where we're all suffering these shortages in these areas, well, maybe some thought to how we could get a bit of a risk-based approach in there. Where do we see the biggest risks are to be able to keep the productivity going and the pipeline going? And how could we somehow, use that risk-based approach to say, yeah, these should be probably the things that we should look at first, second, third. And somebody made the point of the LET meeting. I don't know who it was. Were you there, James, at the last meeting? and said, you know, the fact that a lot of the funding is going to come in the third wave for this is quite challenging. It was you,
It wasn't me.
wasn't you?
Yes,
You're nodding,
it
you're
was
nodding.
mentioned.
I'm not sure there's anything to be done about that or not, but I think somehow looking at the resource envelope that we've got will also, sort of dictate the prioritisation.
Yes, sorry, I can't remember who it was that raised it and let me, but certainly across the combined authority, looking at the gain share money part of devolution, it is trying to bridge. We're fortunate in some ways in West Yorkshire we do have that gain share funding, but it's trying to sort of bridge bridge that gap towards shared prosperity fund. Thank you, Shirley. I've got a couple more hands coming up. Would anyone want us to come back on any of those points? Shall we go to Tim, please?
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Lots of fantastic things there in terms of driving the digital skills agenda. I think to reiterate Richard's point, the transferable skills. So in terms of the jobs coming into or individuals coming into the tech businesses, the being able to have the collaboration, the resilience, as well as training on digital, it's really important from an employer perspective that we can get a more rounded individual joining our organisations, and that doesn't stop us developing them on, but absolutely agree that is a really important part of this for us as an employer. And then the second one is really in terms of the question on are there any additions, so there's lots of fantastic interventions here. Do we also have a plan or a pipeline for how we're going to get the teachers, the educators, the trainers actually skilled up to do all this? Because without them, you don't have the right people to do it. So my ask would be for that to be considered, because they're almost the enablers of some of these things to happen, and they're not necessarily in not necessarily lots of them about.
Do you want to come back, Marianne?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a good point, and like all of it, it's not an easy fix. One of the actions in the Workforce for the Future work streams is to look at creating resources for existing teachers to link the curriculum more closely to employment for all subjects. This might have a knock-on effect and create more, but there's no kind of intervention in the plan that is about attracting more teachers into tech, because there is already a lack of people within tech. So you don't want to take them from the tech sector into teaching and then got another shortage there. So I think it's I think it's fair to say it's a bigger problem than can be tackled here. Phil, would you agree?
Yeah, so I think it's a huge issue, and also I think for the higher tech skills, the skills required are evolving more quickly than you can kind of develop courses to teach them. So how you kind of skill people in those high level skills in a kind of fluid way is a big. I think part of the answer to this is as we work through this, kind of an active dialogue between kind of digital employers and skills providers, which I'm sure is happening with skills providers, but how we might kind of facilitate some of that kind of at a regional level and have that dialogue about what we anticipate our skills needs are and how. And we are already talking as part of our wider kind of business engagement with some of the bigger names in digital in our region and how we kind of make that link. So I think that we need to keep doing that because we want our region to be the most attractive region for these types of jobs and skills.
Thank you. And if there are opportunities there for businesses who have got specialist expertise in certain areas, if there was a way of this process facilitating some of that skills transfer as well, so that we have got the teachers, the trainers, who can really deliver this.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Marianne?
Yes, please. Firstly, to take you up on the offer, but also it is one of the priority actions is that link between getting representatives from business into schools. So I'll be in touch.
Thank you. And is it worth on the point you made about, you know, what if anything else should add to the action plan? It is about having that people who are able to teachers and trainers to take this forward. Okay, I've seen some people's hands up. I made a note as I've seen people go round. So could we go to Sharon next, please?
Yes, thank you. I think you do make a really interesting point, actually, Tim. That wasn't what I was going to come in on, but I think there is a spectrum of educators as well, from my viewpoint, because within digital inclusion, for myself, I'm talking about unemployed individuals who perhaps have left school. They might still be looking to move into that digital environment, but it's how do you engage with those when they've already disengaged from an educational system. And then economically inactive residents. Just, you know, for their well-being and their inclusion in society and getting the best of their financial abilities by having some good digital skills. But then you can also inspire those individuals to progress, maybe move and progress out of the current inactivity into opportunities that are out there. But that does rely on the right level of educators and not just putting it in a college school environment, looking at right across the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Councillor Waller, please.
Thank you, Chair. And taking up your comment about experiences, the last time I was taught programming was Fortran 77. It being a specialist of Imperial College Physics Department, it was an essential part of the degree. But I think it's about saying there will be lots of people out there who are quite rusty in terms of their digital education, whatever role they're in. And I think it's about giving the maximum range of opportunities to tap in. And I think in terms of expanding horizons at primary and secondary school, I think that's essential for the gap that will be emerging in terms of the need across a wide range of sectors. So my plea is to work across Yorkshire. You say in the challenge that most of the data that you've got is on a regional level, and I think that there does need to be that awareness that businesses operate across different outlets across Yorkshire, and therefore it'd be good to maximise that as well as the work that banks and other institutions are doing to promote digital inclusion. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Lennox, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to, in terms of further points of the action plan, is there yet a more fleshed out sort of plan for the monitoring and modelling of the success of all of these plans and how they're going to come together? And is that, obviously there's going to need to be baseline set, but is that something that needs to be built into then whatever toolkits are handed out to employers and practitioners, so that everyone's on the same page of what the what looks like success as we move forward through this?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what we're planning to do. That is the next step. We're talking to Peter Glover about this, and also looking at different ways of getting that baseline and building in all those things that you've mentioned so that we can really measure success and ensure that it's in this sort of evaluation life cycle, evaluation is built in right from the start. That's the next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, please.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of quick points. So one to follow up on the earlier one with when you look at what's happening with the education sector and businesses, there are some good examples in the district. If you look at the Future Technology Centre in Bradford, where you've got Bradford University, Bradford College, Shipley College and Keighley College all working together with local businesses across a range of hubs, where that is influencing the curriculum. Because as we've said many times before, the curriculum can't keep up with the pace of change in technology or the digital skills requirement if there's no integration with that. So there are some good examples of that working, and we need to see more. The second one, in terms of something that I would like to see beyond the rollout, is a measurement of staff retention within the district. Brilliant, we have this fantastic successful rollout of the digital plan, and we end up being an incubation hub for London. We need to make sure that the staff are staying here, which will mean we need to make sure that the pay is right, the quality of life and living is correct. And I don't think I've seen anything about that measurement going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Milton, please.
Yeah, so on the SME and third sector work stream, there's a few actions and interventions that target the third sector. As an example of one of those is 100% digital. So if we roll that out across, which is one of the proposed actions, that would equip the voluntary sector with further digital skills. A, for the people working within the voluntary sector, but B, to help those people working in the voluntary sector signpost others in the community to resources.
I think it's a great idea, but what normally happens is the voluntary sector is funded, many voluntary sector organisations is funded by, let's say, the local authority. I'm looking at those voluntary sectors who emanate from the grassroots organisations to have an opportunity to engage, enable and inspire those youngsters and adults who may feel going to an institution or going to a voluntary sector outside of their own culture, religion, faith or comfort zones may inhibit them from accessing some of this. So I really want to see it go beyond local authority, voluntary sector funded organisations.
Thank you. 100% Digital is one of the schemes we've delivered in Leeds, and you're absolutely right. It's those organisations. It's those organisations that people wouldn't have confidence even to come to a council library at the end of the street or on the high street that will go to other organisations that are really sometimes vital for getting that first connection with people. I agree with that. Shirley, please.
Yes, just picking up on Mark's point, first of all, where you see examples, I think in here it just says there's going to be an audit done so I think we could probably quickly highlight and identify the areas such as the Future Technology Centre and others that we could probably get into and use. That would really bring some firepower, I think, to the delivery of the plan. But the other point I wanted to make was a smaller one really, but a really important one. I think international students that are in our region are there in big numbers. And now with the post-study work visa, it's easier for them, if employers will sponsor them, to get employment in the region. A lot of these students are studying these areas of interest. So I just pick, you have them as well, Tim, but at Bradford, the most popular MSc programme at the minute is Applied Artificial Intelligence. And we've got sponsored places available that students can go and work in industry whilst they're working there. And there's just a huge number of potential people that we could get into the workforce. So an international dimension might be useful to add to the what should else should we add.
Thank you. Is that Richard next, please?
So the Careers and Enterprise Company, the Enterprise Advisors, how it plugs into things like that, because I know Burberry, because most of the Burberry office here is IT people, there seems to have been a big success when they've been paired with schools. So obviously that's primarily about careers advice, but actually what's happened is they're going in talking about digital skills and digital advice, and they end up helping the school upskill the school so that they are more aware of, you know, what the future tech is. So yeah, just how it plugs into all of that to make it really simple for businesses. And then on Milton's point as well, I just wonder whether there's an extension of that. Obviously Careers and Enterprise Company might not be interested, but how you pair, again, every corporate will want to have a really powerful offer, particularly in the digital space where they're competing with consultancy work and contractor work, around how people can give back. And I wonder whether there's something similar with the model that we've done with the Enterprise Advisors, which is actually pairing up with local social enterprises and grassroots organisations to support them in that kind of knowledge share as well. I think there'd be a real appetite from a lot of businesses to do that. It's just making those links.
Thank you. Michelle, please.
From an SME perspective, how is this going to engage with that sector and working within construction particularly, what we're finding is digital investment, people are reluctant to go for digital because they think, I'm a builder, why do I need to know how to use a computer? And we've got a massive skills divide coming, but as an SME, we can't afford to invest in that. And even if you get 50, 60, 70% funding, we'd rather spend that 20, 30% somewhere else, because otherwise we're not going to survive. How does this plan help us, A, help our workforce to develop them skills and the SMEs to actually attract the right people and afford to upskill them?
Marianne, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good point. I think looking at the SME work stream, in the action plan there, one of the interventions suggested is a kind of brokerage service. So the SME would come to this service and receive support with signpost to funding, signpost to grants, and signpost to kind of fully funded upskilling courses for staff. So one of those we have at the minute is Skills for Growth, which currently does that, but not just from a digital perspective. So I think, if I've understood correctly, I think we've started to look at tackling that within this plan.
Thank you. Phil, please.
Yeah, just picking up on that point really, on the SME point, I think one of the things that I would sort of look at is identifying sectors that actually may not previously have looked like they need digital skills but actually do. So the example of that is in sort of my sector, which is health and social care, where everything now is digital, and our trainers are having to focus on people having to use a workplace app. There's no physical paper anymore. It's all apps, it's all live, it's all monitoring. So it's kind of identifying that actually the entry level now is much different to what it perhaps was before. And picking up on Tim's point about, obviously we have to deliver that within our training, with everything else that goes on, but we have to do that from our own budget, if you like. So kind of thinking broader as to how we can invest in organisations to help in the long term.
Thank you, Phil. Tim, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just again on this capacity point, I think the point about training capacity is a fantastic one. There is one around management and leadership for digital transformation too. I think this is particularly relevant to the strand of work on SMEs and third sector in this area to have, well, it's one of my sound bites. There are as many world's top 250 business schools in the Northern Powerhouse as there are in the entirety of Scandinavia, and the majority of those are in Yorkshire and Humber. So there is significant capacity here, I think, to build on what you're saying around, for example, the Skills for Growth investment, to build on management and leadership capacity for digital growth.
Thank you, Tim. I don't see anybody else with their hands up. It's been really helpful, and I saw Marianne furiously writing away during that. So thank you for everybody's contribution to that. Just for the formalities, we do have a recommendation on this that we agree the digital skills plan with any further changes to be picked up, and I think there's quite a lot of issues that have been raised there. So I take it everybody's happy with those recommendations, and really useful to get everybody's input onto that item. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 8, and which is the investment pipeline, including employment hub, and which is one of the areas we have oversight on as the Employment and Skills Committee. And I'll ask Sonia Midgley to come and present this item, please. Morning, Sonia.
Morning, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if the microphone's on, so hopefully everyone can hear me. So I just want to build on the paper that's been circulated as part of your document pack in terms of an update and next steps. And there are 4 key areas that I would like to cover this morning, including the approach to developing the pipeline and a proposed order or wave or sequencing of how we might do that. There is a date in everyone's diaries in a couple of weeks' time, or certainly later this month, where we can look at this and consider it in more detail. So this is just so this morning it's just for purposes of update. The other two things I'd just like to highlight to this committee is a request for endorsement for one of the proposals to develop a business case around employment West Yorkshire, and I'll come on to that in a moment. And then I'd also like to update this committee on the work that's been undertaken by the Climate and Environment Committee, but is very specific to the work of this committee because it focuses on green skills. I just want to bring you up to date on that as well. So, Marianne, if you could just go to the next slide for me, please, or the one after.
Move out of the way.
Thank you. So this slide summarises the approach that we'd like to take to developing the pipeline for employment and skills. And that includes considering how the £21 million of gain share funding that's been notionally allocated towards this work from the Combined Authority could be used. So the investment pipeline will be steered the priorities that this committee have agreed within the employment and skills framework and from the West Yorkshire Investment Strategy, Investment Priority 2, which is people and skills. But there are 44 priorities there for action. So there will be a need to prioritise those. So that would be the first step. And then, of course, we need to consider the interventions and programmes that can address the problems that have been identified in those priorities, including learning from existing programmes that are delivered by the Combined Authority, but also our stakeholders and partners across West Yorkshire, but also benchmarking with what other areas are doing, whether that's nationally or internationally. And then the third stage of that would be to then consider how do we do that? So who's best placed to deliver that? What's the route to market? And it's and included in that, there's lots of listening to the sector that we need to do. So there's employer workshops that we've been holding to get the voice of the employer, and we're keen to engage with learners as well, so they have a voice in shaping what the pipeline looks like. And it's at that stage then, a business case would be developed for specific interventions. So when you've just been discussing the digital skills plans and some of the really great recommendations you made around actions that we could consider for developing interventions, that's the kind of stage that we would take that forward. So to help us do that, based on the feedback that we've had to date, if we could just move to the next slide, please. What we've tried to do is prioritise the order that we could take these things in. So this is just a high-level overview of what's detailed in your papers. So what's being proposed here is that in wave one and for immediate business case development, we'd like to take forward a proposal, develop a business case for Employment West Yorkshire, which is an evolution of a programme this committee will be really familiar with, probably better known as Employment Hub, which was originally funded through ESF funding and then latterly through gain share funding as part of economic recovery, so that it could flex and change the programme from supporting young people 16 to 24 to adult to be a more universal service. The current programme is due to end, the funding is due to end in March 2023. Employment Hub models have been really successful. They're delivered through a kind of hub and spoke model, so regionally coordinated but delivered by local authorities. And over the last few years, they've really grown to be a key part of the employment support landscape. So they've supported over just under 10,000 individuals to progress towards work. But also importantly, at that local level, through some mapping that we've undertaken as a combined authority, there are a huge number of different employment support programmes that individuals can access. So the local hubs really provide a single point of contact for individuals and can do sort of that referral to and from different programmes and handhold individuals so that they're accessing the right employment and skill support at the right time. Some of the learning of the past two, Employment 1 Hub and Employment Hub 2, is that the flexibility to be able to support the changing clients within the labour market is really key. So we're quite keen to build that into any future business case. But also the ability, the flexibility that gain share funding gives us to be innovative and creative we'd like to pilot and test some models around supporting individuals to get digital skills, and it could be that those are about the digital inclusion skills that individuals need, or it could be about the digital skills needed for work as well, but also green jobs, which is one of the mayoral pledges. She's very keen to see a number of young people progress into well-paid, skilled green jobs, so we would like to pilot an approach to that as well. So the proposal for wave one is to work up a business case to the value of 12 million, which is a change from what's in the papers, which says 6 million, and to undertake a wider consultation with stakeholders on the delivery model, including the business case development and the design of the programme. It's important to say that SPF, as we heard at the beginning from the chair, comes into force in 2024, so where we can swap out the funding from gain share for shared prosperity fund funding, we will do that. So I'll keep going. So digital skills, I think we've covered in the last item, but the proposal there is that from the work that Marianne's done on setting out the priorities, it's about then choosing which interventions we would take forward. Green skills is slightly different because this is actually not being funded through the investment priority 2, the 21 million of gain share. It's being funded through a different investment priority. So for that reason, we're on a slightly different timescale, and we've had to develop an outline business case for submission for our internal assurance processes, which is due to be submitted in the next 2 weeks. Marianne, could you please move to the next slide? So this is an overview of what we're proposing in the outline business case, and we have consulted with various groups and stakeholders on this and what they'd like to see prioritised. We've looked at some of the options of how we could do this. We'd like to come back out to the sector and just test those options out with you before the business case is submitted. But we propose that we take forward at a high level all of these options to seek between 5 and 15 million pounds worth of funding through the Climate Environment Action Plan, and that we will develop the business cases for the individual ones that are bulleted on that slide in October, which is when we expect to get approval for these headline proposals. So if we move back to the previous slide. So the waves 1 and 2 is followed by wave 3, which is, so no programmes have been developed, no interventions are designed at this stage. We want to have a conversation about what skills support for employers might look like, what skills support for individuals might look like as well. And then moving into wave 4, which again is an update from your paper, but is added as a result of feedback from stakeholders and some of the things they'd like us to consider. We've got in there things around improving young people's destinations, career support, attracting talent to the region, and graduate retention. So I think that concludes the high-level overview. So I'll hand back to Chair for people's comments and questions.
Thank you, Sonia, for taking us through that. I'm going to start with a question, then I'll bring it to committee. It's not a question. It's just in terms of it's a point Michelle made on the previous item on the sort of the top box on wave 3 in terms of engagement on the skills support for employers. Just sort of really interested to notice a little bit more about that and how we can we've got employer representatives here and on the LEP and across combined authority, how we can do that work, really sort of getting employers' input into doing that, please.
Yeah, so we've held an employer engagement workshop. We plan to do that on a regular cycle, so we will take those kind of interventions and consult with you through that forum. But as members of the committee as well, there's focus workshops for members of the committee to feed into the design of interventions too.
Thank you.
I mean, Sonia's absolutely right. I mean, this is really important for us in terms of developing it. We've got to have that voice of the employer and the voice of the learner actually in what we do. And I think we're beginning to do that more, and we will continue to do that more. I think we're also interested in getting to the people that aren't in committees and how we speak to it. So how we speak to the wider employment and wider employers, particularly when we're talking about SMEs, and how we engage them in a way that works for them, recognising they might not have time to input or might not want to have as much understanding of the skills world to input. So we're thinking about that.
Thank you. Anybody on the committee want to either ask a question or make a comment? Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you, Chair. You've got graduate retention and attracting talent to region in wave 4. I think that's too long. If we can bring that forward somehow, because that immediately helps those skill shortages, doesn't it? And we heard someone earlier say about, well, we need to be careful to take people out of business to train people, because then we affect business. So if we can retain our graduates and attract new talent, that helps to address some of those issues. And I know it's challenging because we all know there's huge problems within the country with skill shortage. But to wait till wave 4 seems a bit too far down the line for me. We should be trying to retain those people now, because people finishing college or university, well, they're finished now, haven't they, virtually. But next year, and we're missing 2 years. But we really need to try and retain those graduates. And I know it's always been a challenge within certain parts of the combined authority, but I think we really need to put some effort into retaining those. Because somebody said, we don't want them all moving down south, do we?
Thank you, Chair. Three points, if I could. First, in terms of the first slide that you showed, in terms of the prioritisation process, how is it? What are the criteria that go into then deciding what's more important than others?
So we have a set of priorities from the Employment and Skills Framework, which is the overarching strategy for this area of work. But then we also have the excellent work that Peter Glover, our Economic Evidence Manager, does around state of the region and labour market intelligence. So between the priorities and the current state of the labour market, I think that's how, using that evidence base, that's how we can help our decision making in funneling through what the priorities are.
Okay, thank you, understood. So second question, in terms of the logic, in terms of the wave 1, 2, 3, 4, is that, well, I might have answered the question, but is that then based on just what you said? So it's based on those the 5 priorities, local labour market, to decide how we've got the 1 to 4 in terms of the waves and the content?
No, because what I didn't mention as well, so sorry to go back to your previous question, there's also the consultation, the wider voice of the employers and the learners, and what other areas, what other people are doing, that informs that prioritisation as well. The next slide, which waves the interventions, was just a way of grouping the priorities by so the first wave, you've got like skills that are important to the economy, so green and digital, and then they're grouped really into what could we do for individuals, what should we be doing for employers. So it's at that high level. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it was just understanding the logic, and the last point on the work on those waves. Is it possible to link them back to the 5 main strategic priorities?
Yes, we've done that mapping work.
Right.
So yes, I think that, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just so we can clearly see, what's been delivered against each of those priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Phil, would you like to come in, please?
I just want to pick up. I mean, Sonia's right in what she said, but I just wanted to pick up a few more points on those excellent questions. I mean, on the prioritisation point, I think we do live. I mean, let's put the elephant in the room, right? So there is probably a lot of challenges to our levels of funding, and those challenges have now been intensified by the levels of price inflation that exist out there. So whilst we have these discussions, we'd like to fund everything and every area, we are going to have to make some tough prioritisation decisions based on evidence, and that's why Sonia sort of outlined the evidence being so important and that voice. So we need to think about how we do that. We also think about who delivers, where it delivers. Do we have kind of a local community type approach? We might have an employment hub. Do we have a more regional approach, speaking to large employers? So we need to work out those balances for different things. And the kind of ordering, I think, is also about logic and pragmatism. We have to get business cases together. We have to develop the commissioning frameworks. We have to kind of get it out. So it's about how we phase that, and some of that pragmatism is driven by when funding streams and existing programs run out. So I think it's worth saying that, so you kind of understand some of that has driven the timing as well. And that relates back to the point of course, we need to keep graduate retention all the time, and we're not deprioritising it to wait for 3 years. We are wanting to do that all the time.
Thank you. Shirley, please.
Yeah, just a couple of points. I think the employment hubs, there's a lot of effort being going into making them work more effectively, and I think it would be a retrograde step if we weren't going to want to support those to continue. From my personal experience in Bradford, I think that we're making more progress with them. But the points about graduate retention, we are working on it, and I think the sort of short, medium, long term might benefit from things that are already going on through different mechanisms. So all the universities are working together with employers to do more about graduate retention. I think I did forward, I think it was to Brian, I can't remember, or Phil, a paper that Yorkshire universities had just recently commissioned and been completed, which details the graduates in Yorkshire, where they go to, where they're getting employed, the retention rates. We're not worse than any other area in keeping our graduates, but we always want to do better. And they are employed largely in highly skilled jobs. So there's good work being going on there. But I think if we could get more involved with some of these work streams, I think the university sector would probably be able to get some work going. That doesn't look as if we're waiting until 24, 25. And just on the green skills, I think some further discussion around the green skills, because I know this has been said many times, most jobs are going to end up being green, and it's which ones we want to green and how we can get the young people to understand that you could be working in the chemical industry, but it's green chemistry we're doing more, and even working in polymers and things is trying to get them not to think it's not just about being an EV, an electrical vehicle engineer or whatever.
Thank you. Tim Thornton, would you like to come in, please?
Thanks, yes. And really to second some of the things Shirley's just said, there is a danger that we think ourselves into a rather dark place around graduate retention. And actually, if you look back over the last decade and more, one of the few regions in the UK that has been an attractor of graduate talent outside London and the South East is this one. It's Yorkshire and the Humber. Now, that is a strength on which we have to build. Doesn't take away from the fact that this report rightly picks up on the fact that SMEs in particular are concerned about graduate retention and their access to the graduate labour market. But we're not starting from the position that the North East are in or the South West are in, where there's a massive brain drain taking place every year, where young people leave the region, go to attractive universities like the ones here in West Yorkshire, and then never go back home again. So I think we should start from recognising that position of strength. I just wanted to say that I think, as Shirley's indicated, there is a significant amount of work already being done on these themes around high-level skills by universities. There's been a report recently produced, I think it's linked to the work that has just been referred to, under the chairmanship of Karen Bryan at York St John on graduate skills and the Yorkshire labour market. And Yorkshire universities collectively are committed to working on that. I'm sure there will be points within that which we can feed into the development of this agenda. I compared notes with Peter before the meeting. I was slightly concerned. There's reference to HE as stakeholders in this process. He's not aware of having been consulted on it as a representative of Yorkshire universities. Certainly nothing's come my way. It may have come Shirley's way, but we are very keen to be active supportive stakeholders in this process. And as I say, there is a lot of work already being done through Yorkshire universities to build on that.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Dacre, please.
Thank you. So you were talking about scarce funds, and I just wanted to check. You said that they've increased the funding, or doubled it effectively, from what's in the paper, from 6 to 12 million. Did you say that's coming from the Shared Prosperity Fund?
It's the business case is for gain share funding, but where we can swap out the gain share funding for Shared Prosperity Fund in year 2, we will do that. We just don't know enough about the design of Shared Prosperity Fund to be able to commit to that at this business development stage.
Thank you. And Mark, please.
I think Phil wanted to come back on a quick point on that first. Are you okay? Thank you. Could I just recommend that we, and I will declare slight conflict of interest on this, that we engage with the Western North Yorkshire Chamber of Commerce, in particular the new Chief Exec James Mason and the new Head of Communication and Policy, Mark Caskey, who I'm sure lots of people know as well.
Absolutely. We are doing it, but we'll do it more, and noted the change of personnel at the top of that organisation that's just happened in the last few months.
Thank you. Richard, please.
Yeah, just quickly on the creative skills bit, I feel like I should say something here. I just thinking back, because one of the projects that I mentioned before, the Burberry Inspire programme, comes to an end next week, I think. I'm no longer anything to do with it, but a big part of that programme was around how you connect arts institutions in the region to schools. And the results that are coming out of the research that went alongside that are clearly showing that it has a multitude of benefits that kind of feed into this. So this is about both linking young people that are disenfranchised from their local communities to big arts institutions that they would never ordinarily interact with, and kind of opening the door to that. So it strengthens those institutions, places, and communities, I think. And it also set around looking at the kind of barriers, so the social skills that we were talking about, all these things that young people are perhaps lacking, like self-efficacy and all those things that both green skills and digital skills are going to require. How you actually develop that through embedding arts and culture in school. And you can see from the results there's something in it, and I'm just wondering whether it's other funding streams. I know they're looking at the National Youth Guarantee and out-of-school activity, but how we kind of supercharge some of this through, things like the City of Culture stuff. How do we actually make sure that those great assets in creative industry are actually getting into the schools that are currently not linked to it at all?
I'll pick that up. I lead on culture policy as well as skills policy. So, I mean, this is really, really close to our agenda on culture and creative sector and sport, actually. So, so in another committee, which is the Culture and Sports Committee, which the mayor chairs, we are exploring kind of the role of kind of culture and the creative sector in levelling up. And I think kind of when you're preparing kind of people for work, young people for work, it's about that combination, not just of skills, but confidence and connections, and confidence in the world and confidence in engaging. And that's why I think what you're raising kind of really resonates with exactly, you could sit in the culture committee and hear people in my team and myself talking exactly the same language. You've spoken about that. We are, it's mentioned in the slide, but I don't think it was referred to in presenting it, about refreshed creative catalyst. At the moment, there's a few things planned in the culture programme, one of which is that we are going to be doing a Young Poet Laureate competition in all schools across West Yorkshire, working with Simon Armitage, the Poet Laureate. So that's going to be going around. Hopefully, we're commissioning that at the moment. Hopefully it's going to be in spring next year. So that's going to, with the aim of kind of giving kids from a range of background and be inclusive and not, I say competition, but there's a lot of non-competition elements of it. And also we're looking at what's known as the Mayor's Screen Diversity Programme, which began as Beyond Brontes, which was kind of born from the kind of Leeds Bradford bid for Channel 4, and gives people in the screen production sector the kind of skills, confidence and connections to kind of have a job in that sector. We're looking at how we might do that for wider creative sectors, so we're kind of keen to talk to you about that. And some of the funding for this, a bit like the green stuff, that the green jobs that Sonia spoke about, might come out of the culture pot of money, because there's a separate pot of money for culture, and probably will. So we're thinking about how much we allocate for skills there. So I think with this and the green thing, there's a bit of a trick in how we kind of connect the agendas where they're governed by different committees. Which is partly why we're taking the digital skills to the business committee, because it's governed by this committee, but they have an interest. So I think we need to work on that as we go through all of this.
It's really interesting, but it's that kind of I guess where I'm coming at it from a Burberry perspective, you can see how, although it's culture and arts, it's absolutely the digital skills, and this is about kids' basic level skills for whatever industry they go into. So yeah, I appreciate it's complex, but it's interesting how it's integrated.
Great, thank Richard and Phil. Sonia, is there anything you want to sum up with, please, before we turn to the recommendations?
No, just thanks to everyone for the comments noted, and look forward to picking it up in the workshop.
Great, thank you. So I'll just turn to the recommendations that are on page 76. So the two are that we endorse the business case for development, and like Sonia says, there's been a lot of useful discussion here. We'll bring that forward to a workshop, and also to endorse the Employment West Yorkshire outline business case for development. So is everybody happy with those two recommendations? Great, we'll move.
Okay, so under this item I'd like to cover two aspects. First of all, to deal with the proposal for the Skills Advisory Panel work in the coming year and how this will support the implementation of local skills improvement plans in West Yorkshire. That's the first element, and then the second element is to provide a brief overview of the latest position on the key labour market indicators. So paper 9 covers the first item, and the background to that is that the Department of Education have made available £55,000 during this financial year to support an analysis of local skills needs. And this is under sort of the aegis of the Skills Advisory Panel, and effectively this committee serves as the Skills Advisory Panel for West Yorkshire. So that allocation of money broadly reflects the approach that's been taken in the last year. Now, the department requires that those analytical activities should be set out in a memorandum of understanding between the combined authority and the department, and we've worked on that. This year, though, the department's made clear that the analysis work that we do should be primarily undertaken to support the formulation of local skills improvement plans. So accordingly, within our memorandum of understanding, we've made the support for LSIP's local skills improvement plans the sort of sole focus. So just a bit of background on local skills improvement plans. So LSIPs, for short, will be based on intelligence on skills needs, including feedback from employers, and will aim to provide the basis for a more flexible and responsive skills offer for local areas. So development of LSIPs will be led by employer representative bodies in all parts of England. And in West Yorkshire, the Chambers of Commerce have submitted an expression of interest to undertake this role. However, the department's also indicated that LSIPs will need to take due regard of the views of MCAs, of combined authorities. So this committee and the CA will have a role in actually reviewing the local skills improvement plan. So the way forward that we're proposing in the paper is that we plan to consult with West Yorkshire's employee representative body once it's appointed, and we expect that will be the Chamber, to determine the specific focus of the analytical activities that will be funded through the £55,000 to support the development of the LSIP. In the paper, we've also suggested that the committee may wish to offer an advisory role to the Chamber on the Employment and Skills Committee, and this will fit with the committee's governance role in respect of strategic skills programmes in West Yorkshire. So basically, the LSIP does not confer, say, commissioning powers or a commissioning role on the Chamber as ERB. So there's an important role to be taken forward in terms of embedding the LSIP and ensuring that its recommendations are actually reflected in the delivery of provision, and there's a potential role for this committee in undertaking that. So we're suggesting that the committee consider that. So that's the first item.
Thanks, Peter. I think what I suggest we do is take any questions or comments on this item and the recommendation in the paper, then move on to the employment market information update. So, Mark, please.
Not a comment, just to declare a conflict of interest. So I won't comment on this. I'm a director of Western North Yorkshire Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Malcolm. That's noted. Does anybody else want to comment on this? Tim, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just how do LSIPs fit with all the, because we've talked about lots of relationships between this 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 committee and business and stakeholders. So what is there a risk that LSIPs just then duplicate some of that, or is there a natural fit of an LSIP into what into how we work now?
I think there is a risk, isn't there? Which is why we have to work together on it. I think, yeah.
The important point is that we don't lose the voice of business in in shaping what future provision might look like. And obviously we've got business representation on this committee and on the LEP board, and then now we've got obviously the government are rolling out the local skills improvement plans, which have been initially led by the business representative organisations and the chambers. And I think rather than to avoid that duplication, it makes sense to ensure that business voice is embedded in some of the committee's work. And I think that's obviously the rationale behind the proposal to offer a seat to the chamber on the committee if members are minded to support that.
I think it's worth a good challenge, Tim, and I think LSIPs are something the government are requiring to happen everywhere, and it sits alongside our approach in West Yorkshire. So we've the LEP has been sat alongside the Combined Authority for a lot longer than it has in other areas. We've had the approach through the Combined Authority, through the and transfer into Mail Combined Authority, of having business representation on committees like this through the LEP and through people like yourself. So we, in some ways, for something that's been required nationally, we're much closer to that in West Yorkshire than perhaps other areas of the countries are. So it's just as Brian and Phil have said, the really important bit is making sure we're getting the right outcomes, but we're not doubling up. We're not double jobbing on it to get what we need under the requirements of the government, but also to take our partnerships forward as well.
Okay, you've covered my question. It was just to make sure that there's not going to be an overlap, because if we look at the digital skills partnership and all the work that's been done there's been a huge amount of collaboration with business and to all the parties to get that. So is this really extending then the LEP in terms of the relationship and the and getting the business voice? Is that where?
Brian, please.
I think the rationale is to strengthen the business voice in shaping current and future provision. And the important thing is that we embed that business voice in the activity, and we're not duplicating.
Okay.
And I think the recommendation in terms of the paper on is to invite somebody from the LSIP to sit alongside us here. I think once we've got to that point, I think it's a question when they're with us to have that conversation around, to make sure that we are getting the maximum benefit without, like I say, duplicating or double jobbing on it. Great. If everybody's happy with the recommendations, we'll move on to the update, please, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So the second element is really, first of all, to give you a high-level overview or a review of the State of the Region indicators. So these slides were actually circulated yesterday, so apologies that you received them a little bit late. But so State of the Region is designed to provide a stocktake of the performance and progress for West Yorkshire against key socio-economic indicators. And what we've done is drawn out the ones that are particularly relevant to the employment skills agenda. Now we'll actually be publishing a refreshed State of the Region report in September, but the agreed approach to dealing with these indicators is that we, at each committee meeting, will report by exception on any indicators for which we have fresh information. So you're constantly updated on what's happening. What we might wish to do is at next meeting is give you a kind of more overall picture from the latest State of the Region report. So I'll briefly highlight some of the key messages where there is new information, so which means skipping through some of the slides. But these slides are all here for your information and sort of review. As you can see, some of them haven't changed since the last meeting. But the first area I'd like to concentrate is around qualification profile in West Yorkshire. In terms of the qualification profile of the working age population. And this is a key measure in terms of employment skills, because obviously the skills levels, the skills available are a key determinant of economic performance. And the differences in skill levels actually explain much of the differences that we see between local areas in terms of productivity and living standards. So the overall picture though that's shown by the latest data is that the picture has not changed that much during 2021, which is the period for which the most recent data is available. So the proportion of local people who are qualified at level 4 and above, which is equivalent to higher education qualifications, has remained the same compared with the previous year. So you can see that with the teal, it's gone up slightly. You can see that from the teal line on the chart. So the deficit with the national average is 5 percentage points. So it's 38% in West Yorkshire, 43% nationally. In real terms, that equates to a deficit of about 70,000 fewer people qualified at that level in West Yorkshire than would be if we matched the national average. And then looking at the other measure that we have there, which is the proportion of the working age population who either have no qualifications or are qualified below level 2, which is GCSE equivalent, that's also stayed roughly the same at 22%. So we're actually 3 percentage points higher than the national average on that one, which is not a good thing, because having no qualifications or very low level qualifications has a very negative bearing on people's career prospects and earning potential. So what we can see overall is that there's still a substantial gap with the national average for both of these measures. I mean, looking back a little bit, last year we did see quite a narrowing of the gap and an improvement. That's not been sustained into this year, so there is still work to do around improving the qualification base of West Yorkshire. So I'm going to skip a few slides now to go to the next one that I'd like to focus on. Another area where we have new information is around NEET. So that's young people who are not in employment, education or training. And this is also a key measure because supporting these young people to make sure they're properly integrated into the world of work or further study is obviously a key priority for us. And there are also statutory responsibilities attached to it. So we have new local authority figures for NEETs, and they provide an average position for the period from December 2021 to February 2022. And if you look at the chart, you can see 3 out of the 5 local authorities in West Yorkshire have a prevalence of NEETs that is lower than the national average. And this is in terms of the number of young people who are either NEET or their status is not known at the time at which the information is collected, and that's presented as a proportion of the overall cohort. Bradford and Leeds, though, are both above average in terms of their prevalence of NEETs, which means actually the West Yorkshire figure overall is above the national average, about 6%, compared with 5% nationally. The figures for the latest year do show an improvement across all West Yorkshire local authorities, so that's positive news when we compare it with the previous year. But the improvement is actually quite marginal in the case of Wakefield and Leeds. So the number of NEETs as a whole fell by about 120 or 4% between in the latest year. So the improvement is really quite modest, and we still have quite elevated levels of NEETs. So that's the 2 indicators I wanted to cover. We also have a section in the report which I will not go into detail, but we've got more timely indicators of the sort of labour market situation, and just to kind of distill that into a very short overview. Basically, the situation at the moment is that We still have levels of claimant unemployment which are above those seen pre-pandemic. At the same time, though, we still have very high levels of vacancies in terms of online job postings. So we have a situation where we still have a very tight labour market, in spite of the sort of negative economic news that we've had in recent weeks. So the labour market is still very tight, measured in terms of the proportion, or rather the ratio of unemployed people to the number of vacancies locally. We also refer to national data in that little section. And I think the key things to note nationally, which are things that we can't readily measure at local level, are first of all the participation gap that continues. So we've got about 1 million people fewer in the labour force, in the UK labour force, than we would have expected to see if pre-pandemic trends had continued. So lots of people have left the labour force because of older people have left the labour force, and also people with health problems have left the labour force. So that partly explains the labour shortages that we're facing. And the second key point is that real pay fell quite substantially, according to the latest data at national level. So nominal pay in sort of cash terms increased, but the effective inflation wiped out that increase. So we're seeing falling rates of pay in real terms. So that's a quick overview, Chair. Thank you. Also happy to take any questions on any of the other slides that people may have reviewed.
Thanks, Peter. We'll start with Peter Finish. Any questions, please? Milton, please.
I find it really interesting, isn't it? Do you break down the demographics and the ethnicities of these figures, or is it just, do you have that?
So for some of the data, those sorts of figures are available. So in the pack, we've got a chart around the employment rate for different demographic groups. So we can see there are big employment rate gaps for people from ethnic minorities, for people with disabilities. So far as it's possible, we do monitor the equality and diversity dimension across the different indicators. Figures are more readily available for some indicators than others, to be honest. So for the qualification indicator, in theory, data is available, but it's not very reliable at West Yorkshire level. It's certainly available at national level, and we could certainly bring that to bear in terms of saying what the key differences are likely to be at West Yorkshire level. In terms of needs, the data is certainly available by a whole range of different dimensions, including ethnic minority, special educational needs status. We're actually developing a dashboard at the moment which provides access to that data, which we hope to publish shortly.
Excellent. I'd just like to add to that. I think this kind of information just influences everything for me, what we've been discussing this morning. When you're ready to roll out the pipeline, the digital plan and everything else. So it's really, I'd like to see that as a priority to think if we can get that data so we can drill down that when we're rolling it out, we know who are the most vulnerable. And that would be so much better for everybody. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Milton. Tim, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And Peter, great data as always, always very useful. Just 3 observations, one of which I raised with you just earlier. We have got some important recent HE data sets available in the last few weeks and months, particularly graduate outcomes. And I'm guessing you're going to tell me that that'll be available in your September presentation on the state of the nation. But they are very important, I think, indicators of where some of that change or slight deterioration of our rate of improvement on level 4 plus is actually coming from. I'm concerned that although institutions in West Yorkshire performed well in the last 2 or 3 years, actually, particularly in the northwest, mainly driven by Manchester University's massive growth, there's been a relative slowing of that lead that West Yorkshire has tended to have. A question that I've asked you before, second point, around whether we can see more data giving granularity within higher level skills. So obviously level 4 plus is important, but increasingly we need to understand both the higher technical population at 4 and 5, degree level at 6, masters at 7, and obviously doctorate at 8. That may seem abstruse, you know, exactly what are the trends at level 8, but when you reflect our Chancellor, George Buckley, when he left his job as CEO of 3M, one of the most innovative companies in the world, 2/3 of all the employees of 3M, all the employees, had doctorates. And that is the direction we have to go if we're going to have a knowledge-driven economy. Final point, Peter, just an offer of assistance. The report that I mentioned earlier, the one that was led by Karen Bryan on Yorkshire graduate skills in the labour market, one of the recommendations is that analysts in HEIs work more closely with you and equivalents to make sure that there's a good flow of data, particularly around employability. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
It's just to observe that there is a wealth of data right into higher education, and in order to do it justice, the committee might want to consider a sort of dedicated session at some point in the future to really do a deep dive on that data for West Yorkshire, and that could include information around sort of take-up of high technical qualifications.
Thank you. Shall we move on to item 10, please, and the adult education budget? Thank you, Peter. Just as Lindsay's coming to the table, just a quick reminder that Appendix 1 is exempt information, so if anybody wants to raise anything on Appendix 1, which of course everybody's welcome to, we will need to stop the live streaming and ask the press and public to leave. So if you do want to raise something, please bear that in mind and let us have a few moments to do that. So Lindsay, would you like to introduce the report, please?
Can do. Thank you, Chair. So this, so we've provided a report on the adult education budget, which, as I'm sure you all know, is our recently devolved funding budget, 65 million in this year, that supports adults. The paper outlines the current performance of the programme and some of the progress that we've made in our first year. I think it's important to remember we're still in delivery month 11 of this devolved fund. We've also included, as councillors mentioned earlier, recommended some flexibilities that we would like to introduce as part of the Year 2 programme, and following the devolved powers that we now have and the decision-making powers that we have as a combined authority. We have worked with the sector, obviously stakeholders, and consulted with also a range of other MCAs as the flexibilities that we'd like to introduce, because we're very mindful that the adult education budget is a finite pot. So with every flexibility that we introduce, there is a shift of that funding towards a particular group or demographic. However, we're very keen that the funding itself, it is focused on those who are most disadvantaged and those people that we really need to support, particularly looking at the data Peter supplied, those with qualifications under level 2. That is very much the focus of this budget. So the 4 flexibilities that are here for us to discuss today that are recommended, I'm aware AUB can get very technical, so I'm just going to try sort of present the rationale for each of those individually. The first is about expanding the age of entitlement from a first full level 2 from an age bracket of 19 to 23-year-olds and make that just 19 plus. So currently the position is that anybody who's aged 24 and above has to pay a contribution to get their first full level 2, which is the equivalent of 5 GCSEs, while 19 to 23-year-olds are entitled to that free of charge. This means essentially any West Yorkshire adult who doesn't have that level 2, the change that we want to create would mean that it would be free at access point to any adult, not just within that age bracket. So the reason we're proposing the change is that we believe that entitlement to a GCSE equivalent should be available to any adult, irrespective of their age. We also think that not funding that all-age entitlement cuts off some of our lowest skilled individuals from progressing further in their careers, particularly by putting that cost barrier in front of them in terms of the learning that they want to undertake. And also, it helps to bring in some simplification of the funding rules and entitlements, which is something that in the Future Skills Commission we were very keen on introducing. We are aware of lots of red tape and inconsistencies around skills funding. For example, adults through the Free Courses for Jobs Fund are actually entitled to their first full level 3, but yet we haven't got that building block of the first full level 2. So we're hoping to kind of reduce some of the inconsistencies that we see in the funding system through that change. So that's the first change. The second is expanding the digital entitlement to ensure digital skills for all. So following on from the presentation from Marianne, we can see the government introduced the digital entitlement 2 years ago. There is really low take-up of this entitlement, and it is an entitlement, again, to sort of free access to training to get people at a basic skills level. And there's some evidence that this relates to a very limited range of qualifications and programmes that are approved for this, and the level that learning is pitched at, particularly the assessment level and exam criteria, at quite a low level as well. So through this flexibility, we're aiming to work with the sector and identify and approve funding in West Yorkshire for more programmes and qualifications that give people the skills that they need, and focusing that partly on that social inclusion aspect, but equally on making sure that people have the skills that employers want, and thinking about whether those are qualifications, and sometimes they might just be non-accredited programmes. So again, the change, hopefully fairly obvious following the conversations had, is very much in line with the digital plan and that vision of creating a fully inclusive society, and making sure that West Yorkshire adults just have the skills that they need for life and work. The next two flexibilities are both posed as test pilots. So with these, we will be analysing and monitoring very closely, I suppose, learner engagement and provider behaviour with these, because we are aware that they could potentially be costly to the budget, but we do think that they're areas that we should be, we could potentially do more on with the devolved funding. So the first of which is bridging programmes for level 3. And again, picking up on some of the data Peter's just displayed there, we have, West Yorkshire has a lower proportion of working age population qualified at level 3 than the national picture, and it's actually significantly lower in Wakefield. We have had funding in the area this year called Free Courses for Jobs, which has supported adults to have a free level 2 and undertake that study for free, and we have had very low take-up. Which means, unfortunately, that funding is lost to the area and lost to our residents. A lot of feedback that we've had from the sector is largely that there is really a significant jump in the skills and the knowledge needed to step between a level 2 and up to a level 3 course, particularly when we're talking about adults who have been out of education and training for quite a long time and would still very much benefit from that level 3 course and programme to help them progress in work. So the proposal is that we'll work with the provider base and approve programmes that bridge that gap, essentially, supporting adults to refresh their skill set before they embark upon that first full level 3. It could be taster sessions, it could be modules of the programme that they're about to study, it could be refreshers, it could simply be a study skills programme that recognises that the jump between level 2 programmes and level 3. We're not being prescriptive. We're going to work with the provider base, as they understand what, the gaps that they're seeing from the learners that are coming forward for those programmes. So again, the reason for this change is about increasing the overall skills profile for West Yorkshire. And as I've said, as a test pilot, we'll assess the uptake. We'll be looking at the impact and specifically progression to level 3 programmes from the people who've undertaken these, and also consider the affordability of if we were to roll this out. And finally, the final flexibility, again another test pilot, is to increase the number of courses that 19 to 23-year-olds are entitled to. This is a bit of a nuance of the funding, but fundamentally, adults who are aged 19 to 23 who don't already have a first full level 2 have a much more limited course offer available to them than anyone who's 24 plus. And that might stop them from doing, for example, a shorter programme or a more vocational programme that might be more suitable to get them into work or to progress to a longer, more substantial programme. So the proposal, again, is that we'll work with the sector and open up more level 2 programmes for this particular age group, and again, particularly looking to support their progression onto a first full level 2 and recognising that that's the level that we do want people to reach and go further beyond, or that it progresses them to meaningful employment or onto apprenticeships as well. So again, the change is really to provide that stepping stone for 19 to 23s and just ensure that they have that wider range of options in terms of increasing their skills. And at that point, I'll hand back to the chair.
Thanks, Lindsay, for that overview. So I will, so we've got the recommendations around the proposed flexibilities. So are there any questions or comments on Lindsay's presentation of those flexibilities? Or is everybody happy to agree those? I take it everybody is. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 11, please, Michelle, which is the update. Sorry.
If I may just comment on the AEB paper. I mean, obviously, members will be aware that, you know, it's a really difficult economic environment at the moment with inflation running at 9% and a lot of economic uncertainty, which is proving particularly challenging for all the training providers. And specifically, we've had a request from Nav Chauhan in his capacity of as the chairman of the West Yorkshire Skills Partnership to ask the committee to consider a rise in the adult education budget funding rates per employment, and whether or not committee members are happy to task officers to go away and draft a paper and look at that. Obviously the colleges are facing, you know, huge utility bills, huge increases in costs, like all our providers, and if members are supportive, officers can go away and draft a paper for discussion at the next committee, if you feel that's appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Brian. Is everybody happy with that suggestion? We'll come back to the next committee. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Brian. We'll move on to item 11, please, Michelle, in the update on current programme.
Sherry. Thank you. So, as everyone on this committee knows, you oversee a huge amount of delivery, funded through a myriad of different sources, and that's all summarised in the paper that you've got. So I won't run through all of that, but I did want to pull out a few highlights for you, and particularly where they're really relevant to some of the things that you raised in the discussion early on. So firstly, this is it's odd really, because we're in July, but this is actually our first meeting of the financial year, and therefore we wanted to share with you some of what we achieved last year. So in the financial year 2021, so 21-22, you have to forgive me, I was on maternity leave part of the year and I feel like I've kind of lost a year. In the last financial year, we achieved all key performance indicators for employment and skills. We supported over 1,100 businesses to engage with education and training across a number of programmes. And for those where we've got the data, we've got an over-representation of businesses that are located in our most deprived communities. So 32% are in the 20% most deprived postcodes in the country. We reached over 3 million people through our all-age careers platform, Future Goals, which aims to reach people of all ages to help them understand the career opportunities on their doorsteps and how to reach them. So as you all know, we've got access to a wealth of labour market information through Peter and other colleagues, but really what we all need to do is to help people use that information to make decisions about their futures, and that's what we're aiming to do through Future Goals. So those of you who've not had the opportunity to take a look at that, I would really recommend that you do so. And we've also supported over 46,000 adults into training, employment or self-employment. Of course, the majority of that being through the devolved adult education budget, which is actually delivered over an academic year, so that's actually less than a full year of delivery. We're still in that year one, as Lindsay's explained, but we're particularly proud of the reach of those programmes, particularly the adult education budget, into disadvantaged and diverse communities. So of learners supported through the adult education budget, 15% consider themselves to have a learning difficulty, disability or a health problem, 62% are from ethnic minority backgrounds, and 44% live in the 10% most deprived wards. So we're really proud of the reach that we're achieving through that so far. In terms of current activity, I wanted to highlight a couple of things. Particularly, I'd say on the schools partnership side, because there's been a fair bit of discussion and you're clearly keen to see with some of the policy work that we kind of build on existing activity and that we prioritise that reach into schools and linkages with the curriculum. So as most of you will know, in my team we have a number of people whose job it is to work with schools to help improve the careers destinations of our most disadvantaged young people through supporting better and more meaningful links with employers. And I know Richard in his previous role at Burberry was really actively involved with that. For this financial year, 22-23, we've got a target to support 181 schools and colleges to make progress in the delivery of quality careers education, which is measured by those Gatsby benchmarks. So we're being extremely ambitious in the targets that we are setting ourselves. And there was a mention earlier about young people with special educational needs and disabilities and their career. I can't remember who it was, but their the careers prospects of those young people and the benefits to employers of engaging with and recruiting young people with special educational needs and disabilities. The Mayor recently launched a resource for employers around engaging with young people with special educational needs and disabilities, the benefits of doing so, but some of the practical support as well. And that was really, really well received by businesses, which we are delighted by. In regard to the work that we did with Burberry over a number of years to promote careers, creative careers to people that wouldn't necessarily normally have the contact or the access to those, I'd suggest that we'll bring the evaluation to the next meeting of this committee because you're right, some really interesting findings coming out of that, and it's important that it informs our work going forward. I wanted to mention Skills Connect, which is a programme this committee has heard about many times before, which supports retraining and upskilling for adults, particularly in our most acute skills shortage areas. And we've got a target through that programme to support 4,500 people. At the Combined Authorities meeting last month, they agreed to broaden the offer of that programme so that it can respond to ongoing changes in the labour market. You know, Peter's talked about some of the flux that we're seeing, and it's really important that we've got a programme in place that can be agile and respond quickly. And we've also extended the delivery period for the programme until 2025, in order that we're able to continue to respond to an uncertain labour market. So you can have a look at the courses that we've got available at the moment through Future Goals. That's the best way to look at the Skills Connect courses. Currently available in digital marketing, construction, including retrofit and health and social care. And we've got a raft of courses due to be launched in September. So we'll continue to keep you aware of those and how they're progressing. So we're looking at supporting adults to retrain and upskill in some of these areas, particularly to access better paid employment, more hours, a direct link to supporting people through the cost of living pressures at the moment. And part of that offer is we've been able to attract some funding from the Department for Education for skills boot camps. You may have seen some of the press around those, so we're delivering those through the Skills Connect brand here in West Yorkshire to make things as simple as possible for individuals. And we've delivered some of the pilots for that. Over 16 digital and technical boot camps. One of the things that's been really central to the success of those is clear line of sight to a job. So if you're trying to attract, what we've done really successfully is recruit people to retrain, but when you are mid-career, to get the risk out of that, clear line of sight to a job, guaranteed interviews, has been really key to securing that interest from individuals who've got other pressures in their lives. And then finally, we are delivering a part European social funded programme called Skills for Growth, which was actually mentioned earlier on in this meeting. What that does is support employers to engage with the full breadth of the education system, all the way from primary through to postgraduate, because actually, of course, there are benefits to employers in engaging with all parts of the system. And we've supported over 600 businesses through that programme so far. And they were the key areas I wanted to bring to your attention. But of course, if there is anything that
we do deliver a lot of activity. You're responsible for oversight of a lot of this. And if there are any particular areas where committee members are keen to understand more or to get more actively involved, we're always really, me and the team are always really, really happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any questions or comments? Tim, please.
Thank you for the update. Yeah, loads of fantastic stuff going on in there. Would you be able, as part of the updates again, to map those back to the 5 strategic priorities? Yeah, so again, just we can see how all that excellent work is delivering against those hard strategic aims. Thank you. Just help to navigate for those that aren't in this every day, not our day jobs. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any more questions, comments before we close this item and close the meeting? There aren't. Thank you, everybody, for your time this morning. Nice to meet those of you I've only ever met on a little square on my laptop in real life, so it's great to see you all and see you all soon. Thank you.